Hello and welcome everyone to the 7th edition of Tech Uncovered, this time covering or uncovering mobile development. I will not be here for too long. I will give floor to EVGENY who will be the moderator today, but I will tell you that there is Slido with the code Tech Uncovered, so you can ask questions. Floor is yours.
Thanks, and hi everyone, and we are finally here in this lovely room of Mews. We are offline/online, I'm not sure what the type of the event, and yeah, thanks Jan for introducing me, and I would use my phone, sorry, because this is the biggest fear of master of ceremony, to mispronounce someone's name or forgot something. So, starting from left to right, my left, not yours. Adam Shimik, Android developer from Strava. Hi, Adam.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
And then Kirill BUBOCHKIN. Hi, Kirill from Mews, head of mobile at Mews.
Yep.
And last one, but not the least one, of course, is Honza or Jan Kaltun, iOS department lead from STRV.
Hello, everyone.
And gentlemen, I have one question for you. I prepared it for this. So why do native developers afraid of train stations?
It's a good question. Why are native developers afraid of train stations?
Yeah, because train stations have multiple platforms.
Oh my.
we actually need something like here. So I think, yeah, thank you very much. By the way, if you liked a joke, you can post something in YouTube chat. Or yeah, or not. Let's start from the companies and from tech stacks. Adam, what is behind Strava and what's that? Maybe not everyone uses that. There are people who are not running at all and not exercising. So what do you guys use and what do you do?
So at Strava, basically the front and center of the product are our mobile apps, and we have iOS and Android mobile apps. They're both built by the native technologies for each of the platforms. So Android is built in Kotlin and Java. iOS is built in combination of Swift and Objective-C. The backend is a combination of sort of like an old monolithic application written in Ruby, and which we are trying to like phase out. And then we have a lot of microservices, and we nowadays usually use Scala to write those. So that's in general.
And what is Strava? Because yeah,
I wasn't sure if I should answer that. So if I should tell that. So Strava is the leading social network for athletes, and it's kind of like your home of your athletic life, and also the record of activities. You know, the world's record of all the activities and just athletic achievements, etc. So
I'm asking these questions because, you know, a friend of mine, he works for Google, and when he visiting family, and he was like, it was family dinner, and his aunt or grandmother asked, where you working? He was like, I'm from Google. He's like, Google? I don't know. So probably maybe for Strava and Mews and STRV and for Wrike, yeah, we should explain. Kirill, I know that you are more on the dark side and multi-platform, all these things. Maybe you can explain what Mews, what do you guys do, and yeah.
Yeah, sure. Basically, Mews is a property management system for hotels, and regarding mobile, our specific is that mobile products are not our main products. We are building property management system. And mobile apps, although we have two of them, they are kind of complementary. That means that one of the apps is a small version of property management system, but intended for housekeeper, for technical stuff. So it's really a small subset of features. And another app is a kiosk application for automatic check-in, check-out. Basically, this is customer-facing application that you should see when you come into the hotel lobby. And yeah, for us, initially, these applications were written natively in Kotlin and in Swift. About 2 years ago, we started experimenting with Flutter, and we've migrated one app to Flutter. It went well, it was perfectly suited to our needs, and recently we decided to migrate another application, so it's right now it's about 1 month in production.
Thanks, Kirill. And last but not least, then we will start from other side. Honza, so the STRV, what is STRV? And you guys, as far as I understand, you're using all variety of platforms, languages, and so on.
Well, we are in a slightly different position than Mews and Strava because we're an agency and we build applications for our clients, mostly from Silicon Valley, but not only. We do support various tech stacks, but we do have our preference, of course. So on iOS, that would be, of course, native, with Swift being the main language. Objective-C, yeah, we can do it. It's not our favorite, of course. Similar thing goes for Kotlin and Java. We can do both, but Kotlin is our preferred tech stack. On backend, we use mostly Node.js, but we can support also different platforms as the customers need. And on frontend, on web, we do prefer React, and our front-end guys and gals, they also do some React Native. And we've been using Flutter a bit recently as well, so there may be a nice discussion. I'd like to know more.
Thanks, Honza. And dear viewers, please, you can, of course, post your questions to Slido, and you have this link in YouTube chat. But if you have anything to say or anything to add, or you totally disagree what we're talking about, just post it in YouTube, and we will have some nice conversation, because we don't want to be, four guys sitting here and talking about complicated stuff. We want to have some small discussion. And about small discussion, Honza, what do you think? Will multi-platform kill all the native developers? Like literally, they will die eventually because everyone will use multi-platform. I would add to my question, as a client, for example, I come to you and saying, okay, I have money only for one person, and of course I want to have all variety of platforms. Why shouldn't I just buy one Flutter developer or something like this?
It's a great question that we get asked rather often, and it always goes to what are we developing, right? Some apps may work quite well in the multi-platform scenarios using either Flutter or React Native, or even other technologies like Ionic or Xamarin or other technologies like that. But it honestly really depends on the use case and what the app is supposed to be doing. Some apps are a good fit, some apps are not so good fit. And we could go into details of what is a good fit and what is not. But I wouldn't really say that multi-platform development will kill the native approach, because well, that is what is the baseline. That is where even the multi-platform technologies start. That is where we come from. And that is what the companies like Google that manufacture the Android operating system, or Apple that manufacture all the devices and the operating system, that's what they use to build the apps, and that's where all the innovation happens. So I don't think that the death is imminent.
I don't know, probably, Adam, you can add to it because you're a native developer and you don't want to die.
I think that this question has been already answered, several times. They have been telling this to us native developers that like multi-platform technologies are going to like overtake us and we will just like die because we won't be, we won't have work anymore. And I will say it, like, if you want your app to be great, just use native. But well, as Jan said, like, there are definitely great use cases for using multi-platform. So it depends, but that's like.
Oh, it's really polite answer, but we would like to have heated discussion here. Kirill, maybe.
Yeah. My main objection is always to the phrase that if you want to have a high quality app, you should go native. No. Like, you can build a high-quality app cross-platform, you can build a low-quality app native, it doesn't depend on this. But despite being the cross-platform developer myself, I don't think that native development will ever die. Maybe it's like saying that will operating system die if we have all the application in browser? They will not. They provide the baseline, as you said, basically, yeah, they provide everything that is built on top of this. Every time cross-platform application is just another layer of abstraction. It can be good because, like, come on, we are not writing on assembly languages, right? But at the same time, yeah, it can be bad if you do a lot of levels of abstractions, like it can be with Electron apps.
There's a problem with the multi-platform approach always, and there's different problems per different technologies that you use. For instance, with React Native, well, the ecosystems are complicated. They're complex on their own, both Android and iOS. And now you've added a whole layer of complication that perhaps someone actually understands, but I'm not sure about that. And then you're building your application on top of that, another layer of indirection. There's bound to be problems, and there's bound to be some catching up with the latest developments on the platforms. And similar to Flutter, on Flutter you have Skia, the rendering layer, right? What if we change our UI on the native platform? What happens then? We, as native developers, we get the updates for all the apps. If the UI system changes slightly, we get them for free. As the user updates the system, well, we get them. But what happens with Flutter in that case?
Well, it can be actually both ways, because like as the situation with Android goes, if at one moment operating system provides a new component which is not backported, once the Flutter guy adopted for the Flutter, for the user to be able to use it, it immediately propagates back to all the platforms, all the like versions of operating system that Flutter supports, which was really the case. Because, for example, like after migrating our application from native to Flutter, native one supported, I think it was like 19 plus back there for some features. With Flutter, with the same functionality, we can provide 14 plus, because basically why not? It's the same. We are just running the Skia engine and it does everything there. So yeah, your point is true in the sense that we cannot guarantee that some new features will be available to Flutter at the same time as they are available to the native developers, but at the same time we can get some benefits there with backporting all these features.
That's an excellent point.
Thank you.
It works both ways.
Sorry, discussion was too heated, so I... But what do you think about this Anonymous, I don't know, is asking in Strava, what are your thoughts on building and releasing an app on one platform only? And we can, for example, talk about Clubhouse. They released only on iOS, on Apple devices, and bam, no one actually uses Clubhouse. Why not, again, release something on one platform only? Adam, what do you think?
Well, in the case of Clubhouse, there already is an Android app. So, and I read like an awesome article about like they had to build it in like 3 or 6, 9 weeks. I don't remember. It was like they had like incredible tight deadline. So it eventually, you know, again like happens, and you will have to build it for both platforms unless your like business case is super specific. So I don't think that's like ever a thing that you just build for one platform. Like maybe when you're like an indie developer, right? Like then it's just your app and you do it. But when you're like a worldwide service, then you need to like cover like different audiences, like in different countries. Like in Europe, it's like most people use Android. In the US, the situation is slightly different, but still it's maybe like 50-50. So like if you want to offer your product to everyone, you have to be on both platforms. If not, maybe more. Like now it's like 2, but it used to be more. Like there used to be Windows Phone. Or like it's like one of like top requests on our like community support forum, and people wanted to like Strava for Windows Phone, and it never happened. Eventually, the platform died, so it's good for us. Not for all those poor Windows Phone users, but yeah, it's.
And about again returning to multi-platform versus native development, Honza said well, actually it's a good point that multi-platform adds layers of abstraction, but again even in native development you cannot develop application without any frameworks, third-party tools. For example, Adam, maybe you can share a little bit what do you guys use. Well, top like 3-5 frameworks do you use?
I would first of all say that like you can't use just basically the like bare bone framework, the SDK that like Google in the case of Android provides. It's completely your choice. You might not want to, because then you have to like write more code yourself. But yeah, it's your choice to, and you have to like decide if you want to adopt some libraries or just like write all of the code yourself. And for us, we now like adopted a lot of the Jetpack libraries from Google. They are great. Like we use Room for databases. We use the view model libraries to basically it's the underlying like architecture of our like MVP platform. So we use that. Then we use Dagger for DI. That's a big one. And what else? We use Retrofit for like HTTP and networking stuff. So I guess everyone uses that. And what else? I would say like if I should just like name those like biggest ones, it's basically it.
Do you use Kotlin?
I mean, Kotlin is a language, so that's.
No, I mean you can.
Yeah, we use Kotlin.
Language is almost a big framework. Well, it's
that's
not,
true.
but so do you agree that, for example, it's the same? Yeah, multi-platform Flutter, for example, it adds additional layer of complexity. But for example, in Flutter, we use mostly Flutter-ish libraries. In React Native, they are React-ish. So it's, yeah, additional layer of complexity, but the same is a native development. But you add this Dagger, Retrofit, other things.
Not necessarily. On iOS, I must say that the life of an iOS engineer is very easy these days as far as libraries are concerned, because honestly, unless you really want to use a library or you have a preference for like, I don't know, LMFire for networking or Swinject for dependency injection, the Apple frameworks provide everything that you may want to. Then there's third-party integrations like, I don't know, Firebase for some real-time data or Crashlytics or Sentry for like bug reporting. But as far as the things that you actually need to build and release the app, everything's there. And it's your choice if you want to use a library, but you honestly don't have to.
And by the way, an interesting question. Do you have in STRV or your clients some policy for third-party libraries? Because it's, for example, interesting point from security perspective. I don't know, some clients, some bank client, they can say, okay, please don't use any third-party libraries. And if you are used to them, it's a big problem.
I can speak for the iOS department, which I'm leading. Other departments, different choices, also different ecosystems and different necessities. But in the iOS department, we try to limit the dependencies to the minimum, as little as we can. There we go.
Kirill, do you have?
Yeah, it's basically the same. When we were doing the native versions of applications, basically regarding the third-party dependency, it was like, okay, let's have green light for Square dependencies and for like Jetpack. Everything else should be considered, whether it's what are the contrasts. In Flutter, it's both simpler and more complicated. It's simpler than, yeah, maybe like in iOS, it provides mainly everything you need to build the app from scratch, because you have UI layer, you have some more or less decent state management. Yeah, in terms of UI, there can be something that you want to build from scratch or take the library, but it's still up on you. You can still build this. There's not that big deal about it. So we are trying to keep dependency list as much short as possible. But yeah, now there are starting to, some like to appear libraries that are becoming de facto standards. And so basically this is all the Flutter communities libraries, some official ones. So there are some official Dart or Google libraries. And in 90% of cases, that's enough. And so basically, as long as Flutter lives, you can be more or less sure that these libraries will live. If this is some like third parties libraries, then yeah, it can be complicated, but it doesn't differ between native or cross-platform.
I think it's also important to distinguish between libraries and third parties, right? So if I'm deciding whether I'm going to use something, we use URL session for networking or LMFire, which is a third-party library, I'm probably going to go for URL session because it is the thing provided to us by Apple, but I'm not going to build another Stripe. So, there's third parties and libraries, and the third parties, well, if you have a use case for a third party, then be my guest, then let's use it. But the libraries we try to limit.
And as Strava, I think it's similar. Like we try definitely like think twice before we add a dependency. It's sort of like an implicit technical debt. Like you don't have to like support it when it like gets out of business. Like the maintainers stop maintaining it, or like maybe with like a new version of Android it breaks. You don't have to fix it yourself or get rid of it and replace it with something else. So definitely like we think twice or maybe like 15 times before we add the library. But right, like I said it, like you don't really have to use libraries. It's kind of changed nowadays with like Google releasing this like suite of Jetpack libraries. It's basically the official SDK, but it's not part of the system anymore, which is great for us because the Android platform is very fragmented. Like users have different Android versions, which means that they run different versions of the SDK, and this layer sort of like abstracts us from that. So we like used these like Jetpack, it kind of like treat these Jetpack libraries as if they almost were the like official things, but we only use like stable ones, which right like with Google, it happens they release something, like they announce something at Google I/O, then sometime after that, like a month, they release the alpha, it stays in alpha for quite a long time, then there is a beta RC, and then 3 years later, there is a production, a stable version. So we tend to wait for the stable versions. So yeah, that's kind of like try to play the game really safe and
And Shimon, sorry if I mispronounce your name, adding, so I am a native iOS developer and I have developed iPad Center app, and I can imagine building without Apple ecosystem. Well, yeah, I think it makes sense building iPad application without.
Especially as Apple has been kind of, I wouldn't say pushing, but supporting the iPads a lot over the past many years. The support is just great. You get native, because on iPads, the apps actually need to run in 3 different modes, like full screen, split screen, and the slide over mode, right? And so Apple had to build a way to kind of seamlessly transform from one of these versions of the app to another. So in the slide over mode, you actually have your iOS app, your iPhone app, and then it transforms and expands, right? And so the support has been great, and I honestly can't really imagine building an iPad app in anything else but the native way. And the same goes for macOS. Now we have Catalyst, which is a way to, quote unquote, one-click transform your iPad app onto macOS. And nowadays on the M series chips, the iPad apps or iPhone apps even run natively because it's an ARM processor. So now we have to support everything. And I would even argue that if you just built an iPhone app right now, for an MVP, that's fine. But for a long-running app, that probably is not enough anymore.
Mm.
Do clients want it to have the app on macOS? Because I can imagine the experience is like, right, it doesn't feel like a native app completely when it comes to like using it and just all the controls and stuff. So.
Well, we have something called Optimize for Mac, which makes it more Mac-y. But yes, it is a kind of a modern quote-unquote looking macOS apps that looks different from the older apps that you're used to. The clients, sometimes they really want it, sometimes they do not. But we try to support at least somewhat the iPads so that the app runs well, because you can't just like say this app does not run on an iPad. It will always run, and unless you optimize it at least a little bit, it will run in the hideous emulated iPhone mode, right? With a black rectangle around it. It's terrible. And so we try to optimize it at least for the iPads, and with some optimization for the iPads, you get the optimization for macOS for free. So you may as well offer this version of the app as well.
Mm-hmm. And you know what we gentlemen always tend to forget in our discussion or in any other discussions, that we are pretty old. Not in the normal way, but in a way that we have developed some applications, and I don't know when you started, but right now there are plenty of people who just starting, and probably for someone who was developing 10 years or more, it's not a huge problem to switch between languages, frameworks. But if you're just starting and anonymous, again, asking which is better platform to start with. And probably it's a great question because learning curve probably is different. And Kirill, me personally, I think that Flutter has a really great learning curve because you can start like immediately, even without knowledge of framework, language, Android platform, iOS platform. So what do you say?
It's both pro and contra. Yeah, it's really easy to start writing applications in Flutter. It's really hard to do it good. And from this point of view, like besides that, I really love Flutter. If you're just starting mobile development or starting programming, don't start with cross-platform framework at all. Always start with the most basic stuff you can. Like if it's mobile, it should be native because basically you will still have to learn mobile development and Flutter development. It's just two things that you need to learn in parallel. So start with one thing, with how mobile development works. You don't need many things. Like you don't need to go deep into many things. You don't need to understand like in advance how UI system works, how like all these fragment activities works in Android, for example. But you need to get the like basic understanding on what are the like push notifications, how the mobile application works, what are the background limits, how operating system works with them, and what resources does it give to you. So start with basic stuff, write a couple of applications natively, then you will more naturally come to what if I don't want to repeat myself? What if I want to write the application only once? Then it will be easier and it will make more sense to switch to cross-platform if you need it. If you don't need it, then not, because yeah, as we discussed, native development will never die. There will be use cases for cross-platform. There will be use cases for native. It's just a tool.
Yeah, but just imagine you're a student, you have plenty of other, you should learn philosophy or whatever students they learn these days, and then you want to develop something and you're like, okay, I need to learn Android, iOS, iPads, macOS, Flutter, Ionic, boom, and bam, you are completely out of your memory.
Maybe I am a little bit too old school, but if you're a student, start with mathematics, not with programming.
Honza, what do you think about this?
I think that this is a very good question, by the way, because recently, starting with iOS 13, there has been a paradigm shift on the Apple platforms. That's where Swift UI was released, which is the equivalent of Jetpack Compose on Android. And up until then, learning how to build UIs on iOS has been difficult. We had some framework called UIKit, which we still use because that's the standard and we can do literally anything in it. But it's complicated. Whereas with Swift UI, it has now become very, very easy to build your first app literally in the first day of your learning. That is underlined by the fact that on the new iPad OS, there will be a release of the new Swift Playgrounds where you can actually code a simple app on an iPad. How cool is that? And Apple has been really doing a great job with this, with the Swift Playgrounds, for example, where they teach you via a game-like environment Swift first, because you need to know the language. So you program code and you move like a cute little character through a scene and you learn the ifs and the loops and everything. And once you've gone through all of that, you then can use your iPad and build a very simple Swift UI app. And then from there, you can start building on top of that. So honestly, I'm the iOS guy. So, you know, that should be the answer. But honestly, I would say if you have a Mac or if you have an iPad, iOS right now with all the Swift Playgrounds is the way to go.
Adam, I'm not a native developer, but I have a sense that Android is less, how to say, it is more hard for newcomers than any other platform.
Well, I don't think so. Like to just, I definitely disagree with this. I would say it's like very easy to start, like like get-go and develop Android apps. But to answer the more general question, where to start, it's usually you own a phone, you have like something in your pocket. It's either these days either an iPhone or an Android device. So that I guess you would like to build something for your phone that you already own. So there we go. Plus, to be able to develop on iOS, you need a Mac, which might be quite expensive. So there's another limitation. Or an iPad, right? Can you deploy from an iPad to an iOS, like to an iPhone?
Once in a month or so, the new Swift playgrounds are released, yes.
Okay. And I was asking if you can build the app from the iPad and then see it on your iPhone.
Yeah, and well, I'm not sure if on the iPhone, but you can see it running natively on an iPad in the iPhone mode. But you can certainly, with the new version, deploy to the App Store. The little downside or little caveat there is that the app has not yet been released, but it's coming soon.
Cool. And so yeah, just use what you can use. And Android has definitely the advantage that you can develop on Linux, Mac OS, Windows. That's it, I guess. And so, or Chrome OS actually, even that's Linux basically. So you are not as limited when it comes to choosing on which platform to develop. So there's definitely a benefit. But I would just I think it's fairly similar. Both Android, both Google and Apple, they have large they have a lot of documentation. Now we are living the era of internet, so you can just go online and search. There are great courses on some websites, free or paid, and they can guide you through developing apps. So I would actually suggest maybe taking one of these courses. It definitely is going to help you to get started. So. And
I think it was it was really true in the beginning of the Android iOS development, where basically for iPhone you had only one screen resolution and very strict guidelines on how the app should work, how it should be you have this MVC pattern that you should natively follow. For Android is that, okay, there are hundreds of screens and no guidelines, just build something. And then it was okay, and how should we build this? What are the best practices? What are the architecture patterns? And then, I don't know, invent this. But now then there are really great resources. There are this Jetpack library. There are pretty much defined architecture and best practices. And both the platforms are moving closer together. There are hundreds of screens on iOS now with iPad, with MacBook, with iPhones, and there are lesser fragmentation in Android, because pretty much nowadays every phone is just brick with 5 inches or 6 inches. That's it.
Unless it's a Samsung, then everything breaks.
Yeah, but that's basically, yeah. Android and Samsung are different things.
And I'm not sure about closing multi-platform versus native, because we've talked for almost half an hour about that. Joe asks, are Ionic and Cordova dead?
Well, no. We actually do have some clients requesting this kind of technology. If you have your whole website built in a certain technology that is supported by Ionic, and you want to do something very quickly and with as little effort as possible, and you don't care as much about the look and feel of the apps, then
you should go PWA.
Then you can use it, but in my opinion, you should go PWA. But yeah, there's place for it. I wouldn't use it. I would not advocate for using it, but it's not dead. It's not dead.
Okay, and I have one question for you. How Android developer would name their fat, lazy, long-haired, long-tailed animal? Kotlin. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And let's talk a little bit about, we can talk about, of course, multi-platform versus native, but mobile development is hard, obviously. Maybe it's not, but again, we have this release cycle problem because we have stores, we should release our applications to stores, and depending on the store, it may have some time. Maybe you can share how it works in your company, because this release cycle can be a big problem or cannot. So Adam, how it works in Strava?
Right, so we release an update of our apps each week on Wednesday, and it's heavily automated, and it wasn't always like that, and I never look back. It's great to when you like don't have to care about that much. And so basically how it works, like on each Wednesday in the morning, at night, like a new branch gets cut in our repository, and that's the upcoming release. And from that branch, we build a beta that gets pushed to Google Play and App Store to test flight. And it gets pushed to our beta users. They use it for a week. And then it differs slightly. On Android, on Monday, basically, we release that version to 1%. Then we bump that to 10. And then on Wednesday, it goes to everyone. On iOS, there's some like limitation with App Store. So I think it goes straight to 100 on Wednesday after the app gets approved. And so that's it, and it's great. Like we get this like 1 week in beta where we like catch most bugs. I can't recall when we had like a large issue in production. It's all usually caught by beta, or like we actually run internal builds daily, so those get pushed to all employees. So there we catch, some like most crazy bugs, like just like the app crashes when started, so stuff like that. So yeah, we use CI too.
And those beta users, they are not part of some program. It's just users who signed for this.
Yeah, it's actually on Android. That's super easy. In Google Play, you can just like tap this button, join beta, and that's it. And I think there is a limit. There might be a limit. I'm not sure, but we have thousands of users, so the user base, the beta user base, is huge. On iOS, there are definitely some limits in test flight, and it's also like a bit harder to enroll your device for the beta testing. So there, the user base is much lower, and but I guess that's.
And probably you have biggest problem here because you have to deploy to both stores, and your release cycle should be pretty complicated.
Well, it's like I think it's. I wish we would be somewhere there as well. It's like there are still a lot of manual steps there. We have manual QA process, but yeah, we are trying to automate this as soon as much as possible. But yeah, the main problem is, of course, that yeah, we need to push it to both stores. We need to wait for approval. It's from the technical point of view, releasing Flutter version and releasing native version, it's the same. Basically, you get the commands that build APK or IPA, then you deploy it, then you wait for approval. And so, yeah, right now we are doing it also, I think, maybe one release per week, or maybe one release per sprint, per 2 weeks. But yeah, we don't have this open beta program because like we are basically B2B app, and that means that our like 1% or like all your beta amount is just the whole our user base. So it doesn't make sense. So yeah, we rely on manual QA testing to catch this some like new UI updates, new manual like new flow updates and things like this. We have some automated tests that run like daily, and like more like integration test with Firebase Test Lab, which is really great that you can set up the metrics and you can like run the integration tests on the whole set of Android or iOS apps. But that's basically it. Yeah, we are looking into some more automated path, like one click of a button and it gets deployed to both stores. But yeah, it's far from that yet.
How you do solve this? For example, for some, of course, your application will not have this because it's probably perfect. But again, for example, you screwed up and application is far from superior. What do you do? You kind of undeploy it back, or what will you do?
There's basically no such thing as undeploying, as you basically need to do the same process again. You can't just like revert. You need to revert, you need to build a new version, you need to deploy a new version. Luckily with this new updates in App Store, they remove some crazy rules where they could hold your version for days, or if there are some UI inconsistency, they say that no, we will not release this. In the new guidelines, they say that okay, if it's just a minor fix, if it's a bug fix, we will not block your release from deploying. But yeah, it's still it depends if everything is crashing, and then yeah, calling your clients, please don't update to this version, stop the manual update, and then deploy a new version.
Yeah, I see. And Honza, probably you have the craziest, because the craziest CI/CD system, because how many usually applications you have simultaneously?
Many. Lots at the same time per different platforms. Some clients require us to build both Android, iOS, web, backend at the same time. Some just one platform. But the interesting part is that we build apps again and again and again because we're an agency. So we start over each time. And with some clients, we have longer-term relationships where the build pipeline looks very similar to what you have. But when you're starting a project from scratch, you just wrote your first few files, right? Then what you do is you release using our kind of a standardized iOS pipeline that we have with Fastlane and GitHub Actions and kind of automatic deployment to the App Store. But you typically do it either when you have something already ready and it needs to be tested by the clients, or at the end of the sprint, for example. The sprint kind of cadence is what I personally quite like. When we screw up, and it happens, of course, you have to redeploy. You have to build again and release a new version to the App Store. But it has improved substantially over the past year. So now it doesn't take many days, but usually the next morning your app is released in the App Store. And there's also a way to expedite the release so that it kind of gets taken care of with a priority by the App Store reviewers. And also on bigger projects, when you're already in production, you can use feature flags and you can just disable a piece of the app. So you find out something is crashing, you switch it off. But that's for the bigger project, for the bigger code bases, for sure.
Yeah, but actually for one of our applications, it's actually where I like Android, and it's more freedom because one of our application is a kiosk for hotels I was mentioning, and there it's pure B2B. We don't need to deploy it to Google Play or App Store. So we basically built a custom App Store just for us, which basically has just this app. And it's pretty simple. We added the support to the app itself. So it's in terms of some unexpected crash and basically unhandled exception, it just checks whether the new version is available and doesn't allow to do anything but waiting for the new version. So for us, it can be really instant deploy. We missed something, the app is constantly crashing, we get the notification, we deploy a new release, and the app just gets this release immediately and updates itself. But yeah, things are not possible for apps that are published in App Store or Google Play.
By the way, what do you use for CI/CD system?
We are currently using GitHub Actions.
Mm-hmm. Looks like, and you, Adam, what do you use?
Well, we have an in-house Strava build systems, but it's integrated with GitHub. We use Fastlane to interact with the stores, with App Store and Play Store. So, but yeah, it's a Strava build system.
Mm-hmm. I see. I have one kind of provocative question / thesis. What do you think? This kind of long in comparison to web development, where you can press one button, bam, your clients will get new version. Does it mean that mobile developers, they in general, of course, they are better developers because they know that they cannot redeploy or kind of retract their code fast, so they should write better software? No, it's not true.
No, we're not. You can't say that mobile developers would be better developers than like a backend or front-end engineers. It doesn't work like that. Like, you know, there's fail-safes, there's mechanisms so that you don't mess up as often, ideally, or never. But never happens. But it's not about one type of engineer being better than the other. Maybe slightly more careful, but better, no.
We have more responsible QAs.
Yeah, that's true.
It's quite interesting. We have almost no QA. It's like there's like no people clicking through the apps and testing it. We pay one like third-party service that does it for us, but it's like they only do it like when there's like a new feature. We just like send them what to test, and but there's like we sort of like put this responsibility on engineers to test their stuff they build, and it works well for us. Like it's been definitely a surprise. Like when I joined, I was like, where are the testers? And when there were none, and up until now we are still like good with that, and it works for us really good, so really well. And I would actually say that it makes the developer maybe, because like, right, like you write the code and then you run it on your phone and then you test the feature, and you know that you're like supposed to like catch some of the corner cases, so you try it yourself. Whereas like if there is a separate QA, you just like kind of like send it to them and wait whether they return it to or not. So then I would say that you might be a bit more careful, but that's just sort of like my opinion. Like it might not be true. Like it really depends on like, you know, from engineer to engineer. So,
but continuing provocative note, like iOS developers should be less careful because App Store does some smoke testing for them.
Well, yeah, they at least browse through the app usually. But like I would also like to say that if you think about it, we can use the expedited review right now. So it takes perhaps half a day to get your app like an update. And if you have an app that is being used by millions and millions of users, if you deploy something to a web and you mess something up, it's almost the same situation. So all the engineers actually have to be the same kind of careful, because you're gonna maybe take half a day to figure out what's wrong and fix it on the website. The same for iOS, the same for Android. So it's the same. I'd say it's the same. We're all very careful.
By the way, question to you guys there. So do you write unit tests or any other kind of test, or you rely on QA, or what do you do? Please let us know in chat. And let's talk a little bit about tests. And Kirill, so do you, and in your department, do you write tests, or what is this testing idea in your team?
Yeah, we definitely write unit tests. Like we don't aim for 100% coverage, because in my experience it never works. You can have 100% coverage and then your app just doesn't work. And but like more or less strict rule for us is that if there is a bug, then we definitely should write a unit test for this, covering this bug and then fixing this bug. In terms of like UI or integration testing, that we do some, we have even less amount of it, but it's still better than it was in native versions of apps, because like UI testing in Flutter is one of the many things, but this is one of the things that was really done perfectly comparing to native testing, both in iOS and Android, because it's simply just because again Flutter is using its own rendering engine. It's just you write basically a unit test which doesn't need the device itself to run the test on. It just knows how it will render this stuff, and it does it on your local machine, which is perfect. It's like time consuming is like, I don't know, 10 times less time consuming.
And Honzo, do you have, what's the policy, or you write unit tests or screw it?
It depends per project. We have projects that are covered entirely by unit and UI tests. We have projects that are, for example, being built towards a very quick MVP, where you're iterating very fast, making changes, and the deadline is super short. In those cases, we may not be writing any test at all, but it is something that in my department, in the iOS department, we're working on, I would say, well, improving, where we would like to start by default, for example, helping our QA engineers with automating some of their manual tests so that they get a little more time for explorative testing, etc., etc. It really depends per project, and it really depends in what kind of a stage of a life cycle of the project the app is currently in. So if there's any iOS engineers who like testing, message me.
And clients can say, I don't need testing, just rush to release.
Oh, no. So there are platforms like Backend that will write unit tests by default, and that is not negotiable because they can't really click through the app, right? So some platforms will always write tests. I was speaking about iOS only in the previous remark. And it is a question of whether we should cover everything with UI and unit tests. That would be a discussion with the client, where we would decide together whether the time spent is worth it, and whether we actually have the time within the deadline and the budget. But if there's some, for example, very complex piece of business logic on the mobile app that we feel needs to be tested, well, we're just going to test it just to make sure that it works well.
Mm-hmm. And Adam, you said that you don't have QA engineers, but what about testing, unit testing or end-to-end?
Right, so we use mostly unit testing. We don't do much, if any, UI testing. We used to use it, but I think then we disabled something because with test, it's just like as any other code, you have to maintain those, and then the testing library gets out of business. It's unsupported or something. So, but yeah, we use unit tests quite a lot. There's no policy though, so you can open a PR with no tests, and no one's gonna come after you. It's it depends. Sometimes the reviewer says that well, this logic should be tested, and now actually our architecture that we use kind of advocates for that. The business logic is separated from the Android stuff, so it's very easy to write a unit test. So it's definitely a best practice to do so, but not a requirement.
Also say at STRV, the projects are vastly different, from very, very small projects to huge, massive projects with massive amounts of users. And you always make the decision whether you're going to go that way or not. But there's no dogma. But the engineers kind of feel in their heart whether something should actually be tested, if it really, really makes sense for them to write the test right now. And as you said, we will most likely not reject, unless it's been agreed upon that everything needs to be tested, a PR without the test. But if it's a heavy business logic, it will be at least suggested by your reviewer for sure.
Yeah, and by the way, it looks like our chat, they don't write unit tests or any kind of test because I have 0 answers. Well, but for you. And by the way, if your boss is there, so please think about it. And actually, a big question, I think, and you, Adam, said that, how to, again, we a little bit returning to the question multi-platform versus native platform, but from different side. It's reusing the code, business logic between applications, because for Flutter, it's kind of obvious that you can reuse it. But between iOS and Android, can you or do you reuse code between clients, applications, because you don't want to probably write this same library again and again and again?
We had different approaches that we tried in the past. For example, there was one project that already had the web and backend part built, and they were naturally sharing code. And so we actually took the JavaScript kind of part of the heavy business logic, and we used it to execute it on both iOS and Android to give us results of calculations. That was beautifully covered by unit tests, by the way. That was I love that. But this is not the approach that we would typically take, but it can be leveraged. Right now, the popular seems to be Kotlin multi-platform mobile. Thank you, Android developers. Thank you. It is working pretty well, to be honest. You write your Kotlin business logic, you give us your use cases, and we can execute them from iOS. The only downside there is there's a hideous Objective-C layer in between the Kotlin compiled code and our beautiful Swift application, which makes it a bit hard to use, but you can be clever about it and make some shims and wrap it nicely. Honestly, it's pretty pleasant. Kotlin is very similar to Swift. You may argue that Swift was inspired by Kotlin and Kotlin was inspired by Swift. So iOS engineers can easily read the code that is happening in Kotlin. It's not bad.
Yeah, and Adam, what in Strava do you have something similar, or how do you solve this problem?
We don't solve it, so we write code twice basically. But we have definitely, we have thought about it, I guess, in the past. But yeah, it's we have a large code base, and usually you don't just when you write a new piece of business logic, it's just usually augment something, or it doesn't happen all that often where you would write a huge new sort of isolated piece of business logic on its own, where it would maybe make sense to consider something like Kotlin multi-platform to just write it once and then run on both platforms. So we are already limited to a certain extent by the existing code. So we just sort of do that. But what we actually do think about now is to at least share API, model classes, use something like Drift to have shared modal classes between all the platforms. We don't have that as of now, but that's something we are considering to adopt. And
we had a beautiful initiative at one project that we should definitely get back into, where we had a beautiful spec of the backend, endpoints and everything, written by our amazing backend ladies and gentlemen. And we were able to basically generate all the model classes based on that for both platforms, and even write automated, generate tests for those layers quite easily. That was neat. Also not usable for every single project, of course. It's another layer of complexity, a layer of building things, but it works as well.
And Kirill, let's talk about superior Flutter code reusability. Probably most of the teams that use Flutter, they go and publish their code if it's possible to pub and reuse it, because you can have contributions from the community. What's your approach to this reusable code inside your application?
It's both. Yeah, we have some of the library open sourced and published in PubDev. We have some internal libraries where it just doesn't make sense because it's related to our business logic. But yeah, it's in terms of general code reusing, of course, it's maybe 95% of the code, of all the code, business logic and UI is reused across the platforms. Some of the code is reused. For example, we are maintaining our own UI library. So that means that it's shared between both mobile applications. So this code is shared as well. Some of the internal logic code, some, for example, in terms of localization or some basic API routing responses and stuff like that. So yeah, in that case, again, that's another thing where the cross-platform, every cross-platform will shine if you have a lot of something, a lot of business logic, a lot of UI, a lot of code to share.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually 1 hour passed by, so probably only strong people stayed with us. So it's ready. It's another question, super serious question. What if iOS developers unite and conquer one European country? How they would name it?
I don't know. How would they name it?
Switzerland.
I thought it would be Austria.
iOS, nice one. Would you like to sit here, because this is the place for a joker? And let's talk a little bit about some managerial stuff. Sometimes it can be a problem for front end, for web clients. Your client can be super big, super huge. And right now there's a tendency, there's a trend for micro front ends, micro backends, or microservices. Is it the same in mobile world or in your teams, and how big is your team, and how do you split it across teams? So how it organized in your case? Maybe Kirill, you can.
Yeah, in our case, initially it was like we have more functional division, so that mobile was kind of separate because we are solving different tasks. We are like using different technologies, and so then basically we came to more like product-wise organization, where you have a team behind a product, where you have designer, product manager, tech lead, and backend, front-end, and mobile developer if needed. And yeah, the teams are like, the team size varies, but it's basically something between 3 and 8 people, something like this. And so, yeah, I think it's in terms of product development, it's the most reasonable way, because of the knowledge sharing, because of the, like, you are in the context, and at the same time when you are like even working on the same, like for example we have a monorepo, so we're still working on the same kind of code base, it allows to more easily share this context, and at the same time it forces you to adopt some best practices, like do proper pull request descriptions, put the tests, do the more readable architecture, because the guy that will review this has no idea what are you doing. So it's something like this.
But doesn't mean that so this kind of like vertical separation between teams, does it mean that sometimes it can lead to, okay, I'm in the team A, and I don't care much about what's going on in team B, but we are both iOS developers or Android developers or Flutter developers. So it's a strange situation when we should care about application in general, but I care about my own code. Do you feel that it's a problem, or it's just a culture?
Maybe, yeah, it's a question of culture. Maybe it's like we are not at this point yet, because initially we were still like one team, and like this team is pretty much like fit together. So we will not do this division between, now this is your part of code, do it yourself, please. It's still the same project. We still try to share as much code as possible. So if this code is in shared folder, that means that everyone is responsible for it. And yeah, if you're aiming to share the code as much as possible, if you aiming to share the practices as much as possible, I think it can be managed.
And how big is team in average?
I think maybe 5-6 people.
I see. Nice. Gentlemen who would like to jump in? Yeah.
Okay, so like on the team size, we got about 10 to 15-ish developers per platform, and we also split the teams into like vertical teams. So usually a vertical team would have like between like 1 to 3 maybe developers per platform. So it depends on like what they do, what the team is. So there's like, again, like no policy, so that depends. The structure of the code, historically, just like one module, and maybe it was like an application module and then some shared module with like resources, some module classes and whatnot. But then like we are sort of like forced to split that up. It first happened when we released the app for Android Wear, where now, like back then we basically had like, we used to have like one app, and now we had like 2 apps, but you still might want to like share some of the code between those apps. So what do you do? You take the code, extract that into a separate module, and then both apps that depend on that module. So that's what we have done. And then like more recently, maybe like since like 3 years ago, we started like splitting the code into more and more modules. The reason was build speed, and yeah, that started to be a huge problem, and just like breaking up code base into more modules should help with that. It's doesn't really help with that all that much always, so it depends. But yeah, it's definitely, I think it's definitely a better approach, and I like it. It also like sort of like forces you to better reason about structuring your codes, and you have to like define, you know, interfaces between layers, and so it's like just like leads to like less spaghetti code, or like spaghetti code, and more structured code bases. So, but definitely comes with some added overhead. Sometimes, like, you know, you need to like depend on something, but it's like you end up having like a circular dependency, so you have to like extract the logic first to somewhere else, and so it's like, you know, there is definitely some overhead to it. And
Honza, your turn to answer.
Well, we're an agency, so the situation is somewhat different. We have almost 40 iOS engineers, and there's different numbers for different platforms. But we have to ensure that we can work together as a team within this kind of a department, hence the iOS department lead. But also we need to ensure that the people from different platforms can work on projects together. So there's lots of projects going on at STRV at any given time, and people change. The teams constantly change. So you may be working on one project one day, and then the project finishes eventually, and you go to another project with possibly entirely different people. Or, for example, you need to come to a project that has already been being written by some other engineers on iOS, perhaps, and you need to go and help them. So we have to solve two problems. How to organize the individual project teams across all the platforms, and also within the iOS department and all the other departments, how to make sure that if you've never seen the project, you can go and tomorrow start writing code within that code base. And so we have techniques, education internally, templates, the ways we typically do things. It's a constant learning curve that we're going through, and a feedback loop as well. And I'm quite proud that, honestly, pretty much any iOS engineer can come to any project that we're currently working on and start working tomorrow, which is pretty nice. As far as the individual projects are concerned, it may be from one single iOS developer to several dozen people. It is different.
You hire only senior engineers or juniors too, or interns?
All of it. We don't typically hire interns. You, at least right now, need to be able to work full-time with us. But we do very much welcome juniors, but also seniors.
Yeah, please welcome. And you guys, so do you have any like borderline you will not hire engineer who doesn't have specialization or something, like juniors, interns, and so on and so forth, Kirill?
Like for Flutter, you don't have that much choice, right? Like basically, I think like most senior Flutter developers are the guys who develop Flutter. Like we are still like trying to understand what did they bring to us. But it's at the same time, it's pretty easy if you are already like strong middle in native Android or native iOS. It's pretty easy to switch to Flutter, especially if you have before some experience with React Native or React. The paradigm itself is very close to this one. So yeah, if like when we hire, like we are open to like mid plus. With some strong understanding in native development, and yeah, if you have experience with Flutter, it's also an advantage, but it's not required.
By the way, a story about Flutter hiring. I manage a small chat with positions and job offerings about Dart and Flutter, and sometimes recruiters, they for some reason have this, okay, 3 years means you are senior, whatever. 5 years, you're super senior. 10 years, I don't know. And because this kind of habit, they post this position, okay, we need senior Flutter developer with 5+ years of development. And you're like, okay, sorry, but Flutter was created only 2.5 years ago. Like, no, we need 5+ years. And Adam, about your team and your applications, do you hire juniors, interns, and how you teach people, how you motivate them, and yeah.
Well, I think we hire like, you know, from like all across the range, so from junior to heavy senior, so it depends on like the requirement. At like any, you know, there's like we hire for a certain position, so there's like we hire like for a team lead, so that person should be more senior, so it depends. We also have an awesome internship program, so each year like awesome interns join us over the course of summer usually, and they are with us for a few months and they do some amazing work, so that's awesome, and it's like great to see them, you know, learn super fast, and so that's I love that. It's amazing. And how we like teach people internally, it's like, well, I think we don't have like we definitely like strongly support that. We kind of support like coding, like pair programming. So that's like one way how to sort of like teach each other, right? Like when you don't understand something, then you like hop on a call or in person before COVID days with someone, and they guide you through something, or they like explain the problem to you. So that's definitely encouraged and supported. We also have like our like guilds, like Android, iOS, web, and we meet regularly, so where we like discuss the platform, the like sort of like the like bigger picture problems that are not related to each of the vertical teams' business and tasks, but more like, right, like when there's like a new Android version or like new iOS version, that's like what we cover during the guild and discuss during the guild meeting, and and we also used to do like sort of like a book club where each week we would read through some usually coding book for an hour, and then like we said like well, or actually we were like supposed to read, say, like a lesson, like a one like part of the book, and then we would discuss what we saw that, and so that was really great. We have also like doing some like group watching of certain like videos from like Google I/O or conferences, so that's how we approach this.
If you can recommend one book that any engineer in the world should read.
Well, we read this Clean Code book. I'm not sure who.
Martin Fowler?
Robert Martin.
Robert Martin, yeah, Robert Martin.
And well, that was a really good one. It's like I really liked it. It was kind of, you know, sometimes it felt like just like going way too far, but actually, you know, with time, I kind of like sort of like keep coming back to it, and at times it's sort of, you know, I see like, well, that's what the guy talked about, and so there was a lot of great stuff into that book.
I would rather recommend Code Complete from McConnell. I think it's like more or less on the same theme, but more deep. Because like I like Robert Martin, but it tends to be more, you know, like this funny guy, and McConnell is more like academic or something like this. But yeah, the Clean Code is definitely one of the best books for me.
And yeah, Onza, what do you recommend?
I'd go with The Mythical Man Month.
Why? It's more like a managerial, no?
Yeah. But I think that, especially because of this, because you then get to take a look at the other side, the planning, what the PMs have to go through and understand where they're coming from, and go beyond the code, which is something that I quite like.
About the books, another interesting story, maybe not that interesting, but a kind of story. The book Refactoring by Martin Fowler. He wrote his second edition in JavaScript. So first edition was in Java, now it's JavaScript because JavaScript is a bit trendish. And in some countries, they release books not in English. And for example, in Russia, they released it, they translated it to Russian language, but they released it not as a refactoring, but the title is Refactoring JavaScript. So, and as you may understand, it's completely different titles, completely different books. So yeah, it can be. And we have a couple of questions here, and I have no idea what, please tell me. So where is that? Would love to hear, Sean asks, would love to hear the guys' first thoughts and opinions on dApps. What is dApps? dApps?
Oh, dApps, D-A-P-P-S?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, decentralized apps, like the apps built on blockchain?
I'm not sure. So, Shimon, do you have any experience with dApps? I was developing dApps only multi-platform, Ganache, Truffle, Drizzle, with my own smart contract.
Yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, I have zero experience with that, so I can't comment.
Okay, but do you know what is that? Because I have no idea.
It is basically writing, using a certain blockchain to write smart contracts on it, as I understand it. I did want to learn the Plutus Pioneer program for Cardano, but in the end, zero time. Maybe next time.
And other question, and we a little bit touched it on you mostly, but your thoughts about Kotlin multi-platform? Probably, maybe Adam, you have.
Well, we haven't used it, and I haven't personally used it, so maybe Jan is a better one to answer that. But I love Kotlin as a language and as a platform. So if it works, it seems like it works, then I would like to give it a try, definitely, at least. So.
One more thing about the dApps, our backend people would be way more competent in answering that question, so please don't listen to me too much on this topic. But as far as the Kotlin multi-platform mobile, it's okay. It could use a lot of quality of life improvements, especially in the bridging part, like where you bridge from the, LLVM processed Kotlin code into your Swift app via Objective-C. And I think that this would boost a lot of the adoption. For example, if in some way the bridging layer was in Swift, that would help a lot. But also I would say that it's not the right tool for every single application. It depends, again, on the project, on the engineers that you have on the project, what technologies they're skilled with. But if you have a ton of Android engineers and one person on iOS, oh my, then that this is the way to go even now.
But I would say it's still not kind of production ready, right? Like I've played with it a little bit, but maybe a year ago. But I've got an impression that there are still a lot of problems in terms that even to set up the project, you need to do some magic, like the coroutines not work as they should, like in Swift. But at the same time, like Kotlin is still my favorite language, maybe for all times. But and the idea behind it is great because you can do the business logic in one language, you can share it. I think they are also aiming for some UI layer with their Jetpack Compose. At least we can use it in Android, we can use it in desktop application, and I think they are aiming for something like this, maybe even also using Scare under the hood to deploy it to iOS. So it should be something interesting without any doubts, but I think it's a matter of years still.
I've seen Kotlin multi-platform mobile deployed in production, and it was all right. But again, it very much feels like magic, as you said, at this moment. And documentation could be vastly improved, but that goes even for Swift UI. So what am I to say? Who am I to say? But yeah, I do also believe that it will take some time to fully mature and be the thing that you would like take without even thinking about it too much. Right now, you have to really think a lot whether this is the right fit for your team, for the app, etc., etc.
And we're slowly moving to the last part because it's already 1 hour And according to last psychological research, usually people have a focus of attention for 1-2 minutes. So yeah, and last but not least question to you guys. Why are iOS developers so frustrated?
I have many answers.
They have lost their jobs.
Oh no, that's so sad.
Looks like it was last time I was there. What do you guys think about? Let's talk a little bit about UI. And Flutter is all UI. Right now we have Swift UI, we have Jetpack Compose, and looks like all this area, all these frameworks, applications, platforms, they are moving to kind of one idea behind building an UI, or it's not. What do you guys think? I don't know, Adam, maybe you can answer.
Well, seems like iOS already has done the shift with Swift UI. On Android is Jetpack Compose. It seems like
improving, right?
It's improving. Yeah, definitely. It's and right. So like historically, we were using XML on iOS. They had the storyboards, and again under the hood is like XML, but you don't want to edit that XML. I guess you are not even like supposed to. So this like sort of like composable and like declarative approach is much better. So, but yeah, we haven't really started using it yet at Strava, at least on Android, with Jetpack Compose. We are thinking now to just like rewrite one of the like about screens, I think, into it to just like see how to integrate it with the product. And we are also some like limitations. We have to like update to the like latest Gradle plugin or whatnot. So just like with an old code base, you always run into these troubles when you start an app from scratch, right? You just can like, start with the latest greatest from get-go and you're good to go. We can't, unfortunately. But yeah, I definitely like the direction in which this goes, but also for me, right, it's always like there's some learning curve, like, right, so like when I tried like write Jetpack Compose, it's like, it just like takes me a bit more time. I tried to do some Swift UI and God, I was so confused. So that's like,
what do you think?
It's different.
Android development. So what are the trends? Where we're moving? What we're gonna see in the future, nearest or farthest?
In regards to like UI development, or
maybe UI, or maybe what do you think? Will Android development will be changed in 5 years? Completely different.
Well, it's a hard to predict future.
It's always hard.
Well, 5 years. I mean, like one large thing now is foldables, right? That's a sort of, there's like a new evolving form factor that's coming, into play, and Google already supports that really well. So that's definitely something everyone should watch and see, what's gonna come out of that, because now you basically have a phone, but it can fold out in a tablet, and maybe on a tablet you have like much larger canvas. So yeah, that's and also like you can have phone and you can like fold it down into a smaller phone and whatnot. I don't know. So there's like this new form factor. Then like Google's like they've been trying to like make Android apps run on Chrome OS. So they tried to do something similar to what Apple did with Catalyst. And like in my experience, it was always quite rubbish. Like it never really worked. So I wouldn't see that as the future. But well, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna change dramatically. Now, definitely Jetpack Compose might be one of the like big milestones. Right in the past, there was like the switch from Java to Kotlin. There was like one milestone. Now, this switch, and this like decoupling from the old way of writing views on Android. That's definitely a huge milestone. So let's see what the future brings us.
And by the way, if you have, and you should have any questions, or you think that we forgot something or missed something, please use Slido or Slido, or I don't know how it's called, or YouTube chat. We will read all the questions. Kirill, what do you think? What is the future of Flutter? And it's moving fast, and we saw many big changes, for example, non-nullable types and so on. Where it's going?
I really hope that the future will be bright. We already invested a lot of efforts into Flutter applications, and I think it's like, it looks like this. Google seems to be really interested in this technology. They partnered with some really huge brand names, like as far as I remember, on the latest FlutterConf, they announced something like who was it? Maybe Toyota. Toyota. Yeah, they are building their car entertainment system in Flutter.
Yes, soon.
Yeah. Ubuntu also accepted this as a Flutter desktop as a language for. At least they wrote their installer on Flutter, and they are going to incorporate it into Ubuntu deeper. So it they have really huge and interesting partners. They are interested still in this IoT, where they want to use this fuchsia and how
it's fuchsia or fuchsia. It depends on which part
whatever
of the world.
whatever you call it. But yeah, it's and even in Android development, even in mobile development, I think they won't abandon it, because it's still, even if they will evolve Android into something big, I don't think they would like to lost a huge amount of developers that are doing iOS development, and they really want to have this ecosystem and these developers together. So I think they will still working on Flutter. They're one of their main focus currently, I've heard, is Flutter for web, which is for now very far from production ready, but they are working on it. In terms of mobile, it's more like maturing the technology, because there are still lack of some plugins, lack of some best practices, lack of some more or less like first-party libraries. But the main effort is done. We've got the platform where we can really deploy, build, and share the code. And even if, of course, if they abandon it, that will be tragic future. Yeah, but it's all possible, and but I don't think that it's going to happen anytime soon. Of course, in 10 years there can be no Android at all, and thanks God we are not at the speed as web frameworks, where you have obsolete framework the day you've ended learning it.
As you mentioned, Toyota, I think automotive is going to be a huge for Android, right? So that's definitely something that's coming. There are already some cars in production with the sort of Android OS. It's not like Android Auto, but there's actually full-blown OS that runs apps natively. It's not just mirroring your phone. I think it's the Volvo Polestar and maybe some others. So, but they have more and more brands are announcing that they will implement their infotainment systems on top of Android Automotive. So that's definitely something that might change Android in some way.
But Android at the same time is becoming more closed ecosystem, and this is not what I like a lot about it, because it's from the freedom at the very beginning, where you had this Android free for everyone and you can do anything there. It's becoming more and more iOS style, where you have a sandbox. You can't do step away from this, and so it's everything. It's about politics, it's about money, it's about controlling, but yeah, we have what we have. From one point of view, it's good, because we are kind of have more or less the same ecosystem, more or less the same platform, which with some little changes. But yeah, it's not that Android. From this point of view, I'm really pessimistic about the future of Android.
Right, and there are also there are two things, right? There's Android, bare bone open source operating system, and then what we have on phones with Google Play services, the the Android from Google, and these are two things. So, right, like if you see Android phones in China, they're completely different. They don't usually run Google Play services. So, and the like walled garden, like much of that comes from the from Google Play services and the open source, right? Like Google definitely. Each new version has like more and more like privacy related features and stuff, and there's like more limits on like background execution and whatnot. But OEMs can actually they don't have to like enforce that, any of that. And what we have seen like quite the opposite, right? So they went like beyond, and they were like killing apps in background and whatnot. So, but then it's like. Android still remains open source, but it's kind of
yeah, it's
it becomes useless.
Yeah, it's this topic where, okay, if you wanted like really sandboxed phone, you could buy iPhone. If you wanted like more freedom, you could buy Android. And now, like, even if I want to build some really like rich platform, rich application, not to turn it into a thin client, just which is just making post requests to backend, I don't have much options there. Like, and but yeah, maybe with like IoT and these other systems, there will be another burst in that.
And it's time, Honzo, for you to take a look at the crystal globe and tell us what is the future.
Well, unless Apple actually builds their own car, there will most likely not be cars built with iOS. I mean. There could be, but I'm not seeing it as clearly. As far as the app development, the traditional app development is concerned, we're definitely seeing a bit of a convergence between the platforms, be it iPhones, iPads, macOS. We're seeing that it's becoming much easier to build apps for all the platforms with SwiftUI. For example, before SwiftUI, you had UIKit for iOS and iPadOS. Then you had AppKit for macOS. Now you can actually go and build everything in SwiftUI. The thing is, SwiftUI is not 100% mature yet, so you still have to go back. But definitely, it's the future of development for Apple platforms. But I'm seeing and predicting a paradigm shift. Whereas the devices, as we use them right now, the phones, will actually be the things that become obsolete. And we've been seeing for the past 5 years extreme push for augmented reality with Apple. And I think that that's where things are going.
And actually, one small notice about this, like, again, cross-platform and multi-platform. It looks like we are already there with multi-platform, but these multi-platform are kind of like guarded. We have Apple multi-platform, we have like mobile like Google multi-platform, we have not the web, okay, but yeah.
Web
like,
is multi-platform by default.
Yeah, but that's basically, instead of going really multi-platform, again, each corporation builds its own multi-platform system, but technically we are already there, we are multi-platform.
But I think you still keep solving the same problems, right? You can like hit a checkbox and you get your iOS app in the Mac App Store. But it's doesn't feel like the best Mac app that's like written natively. So if you want your Mac app to be one of the best ones, then you will probably have to invest non-trivial amount of time and work into improving the app, and then it's going to diverge from the iOS and iPad's version. And same goes like for between like iOS and iPad. So it's like that's still the same problem to a certain extent.
That's what we say with SwiftUI. It's not write once, run everywhere, but learn once and apply everywhere.
And we don't have new questions, but thanks for the questions, by the way. And last, you can answer with 1 word or 2 words. If you would develop your pet project, just for yourself, just which language or platform you would take outside except of something that you are working in right now? Honzo, you can start, because you opened your mouth up.
I'm
just for fun, just for...
Well, I first have a question for you.
Oops.
Do you happen to know why Java developers need to wear glasses?
Why?
Because they don't see sharp. And then I will answer the question that was asked. I see. I hear the audience slowly clapping and letting me out. But I'd use something interesting, something that is different from what I know, something vastly different, though. Haskell would be very interesting. That is something that I know next to nothing about, but would like to, because it would enrich my knowledge a lot. And also, I feel like it would elevate my general programming skills. So, yeah, I'd probably dabble in that.
Okay, Haskell. Kirill.
I should answer first because that was my answer as well. Like
you can choose the same.
Yeah, because like yeah, in terms of like mobile development, it's hard to me to choose because I think I've tried all the possible options out there. So it will be still not something new there. In terms of yeah, I would say any heavy functional programming language like F#, Haskell, or some other languages. I've played with them, but never to some extent where I did really have some like production-ready project. And yeah, I like this paradigm. We implement, like we apply it a lot in our code, but just like functional programming principles, not the functional programming languages. So yeah, it's something that is interesting, and I would like even recommend to all developers to at least try it, because it's really it's a different paradigm. You have like object-oriented languages more or less, and you have functional languages, and these are completely different universes if you do them right. Of course, you can like write in Scala as if it's Java. You can write in Haskell as if it's Lisp. I don't know, but if you really like try to get what the language is about, these are the two paradigms that worth trying.
Well, I will approach this from like a slightly different angle, and I think I would like to like experiment with my own hardware. So just like I don't have like anything like specific in mind, but just like build my own hardware and then write the software for it. So I have like no platform in mind. It would like depend on like what exactly I would like to build. Probably like start with something like Arduino. That's and similar things. That's the most basic stuff, I guess. You can get, but yeah, I know a guy who like wrote his own like GPS computer for his bike, and so it felt like super cool. And so yeah, something like that, like build something I can actually like physically hold in my hands.
Yeah, really, I totally agree. It's really nice. We have looks like it's a last question of today. Joseph asking, how do you tackle device and OS fragmentation? Who would like to answer?
Well, I'll answer first because it's the easiest for us. Since we're an agency and we build products again and again from scratch, we always get to support the current -1 OS version, and that makes a lot of things much easier, unless it's mandated by the client that they want something else. But in general, like it's this kind of a rule. And with device fragmentation, well, what is a device fragmentation? We don't know anything like that on HIAS.
Lucky you.
All the like smaller phones, like the iPhone SE, the 4-inch one, and then you have the Max phone with like 6.7.
Yeah, but then the UI frameworks are built in such a way that it is very easy to like go and support those. And actually, if you factor in accessibility, you actually have to build the UI that way, because the fonts can become very big and things can get really messy in the UI. So you need to count with that anyway. So by default, if you care about accessibility, you actually support pretty much every like kind of a device size.
Yeah, and you kind of answered the question for me, right? On Android, like actually, like from the dawn of Android, it's been built to support, variable like screen sizes and different resolutions and whatnot. So even the UI system. So we are kind of covered there. There's like definitely some limits, right? Like when you are on a tablet, you might have to like consider a different layout when you're on a super tiny phone or on a watch. So like there are definitely limits to this, but if you follow the best practices, you should be good to go. But then there's this huge problem with like the OS version fragmentation. but that one actually has been solved by Google, or like it wasn't solved, but they work around it by releasing a lot of libraries that support us, and that like abstract us from having to deal with much of these problems. But it's still a problem, and but not as big of a one as it used to be. So
this is a big upside of Android, by the way, though, because they had to go and solve this problem. You get Jetpack Compose as a library, while SwiftUI is bundled with the system. So unless you're supporting that particular version of the system that actually has support for the feature that you want, you're out of luck. So this hardship that made you have to be able to solve this problem actually made the situation much nicer for you. I understand the reasons why Apple doesn't do it, but still.
But for us, I guess it's like we are covered on both sides, because we don't care about like screen fragmentation, because we already have this declarative UI framework, which does most of the job for us, and we don't care about OS version fragmentation, because like, as I mentioned previously, like it's Flutter, it runs in its own layer, it runs in its own rendering engine. We don't care. Like when we switched to Flutter from native Android, we could lower the bound of the minimal operating system version we support. So it's win-win.
And we don't have any other questions, and actually it's already 1 hour and 40-ish minutes, so people should be there. Probably they good, because they can lie on the sofa and watch us like this. But I think that's it. Yeah. Would you like to jump in? It's a last joke for today, so you should say it.
Well, I'll take away your microphone, and I have no jokes, but I think you and Honza started a new genre in stand-up comedy. It's dead technology jokes, so you should think about that. And there was one question I think you didn't ask, and it was in the Slido, and there was a question: what hair product are you using? Because and it was a bald guy asking, and it's not me.
Well, there's this like great shampoo from OI, I think is the company called, and that's a really good one, but I don't use many hair products beyond that.
We don't get any royalties for that, but anyway, if you want to look like Adam, definitely use that. And I know
this is just Mother Nature. It's like
and Kirill, I know that when we were talking about the future of multi-platforms, I think there is a great article that you wrote, right? Are we there yet?
If I wrote it, yeah, okay, of course, it's great.
It was called Are We There Yet with the multi-platform. So anyway, EVGENY, thank you very much for hosting. It was great. The jokes, you have many fans, so reach out to them. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Kirill. Thank you, Honza. And thank you all for watching. And definitely add these guys on LinkedIn, and they will be happy to reply to any more of your questions, because these guys started the discussion almost the most at the end, which is unusual. So definitely reach out to them. And thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone,
for joining. Cheers.
Bye.